You know, since the whole deportation started under Donald Trump, there have been a lot of like fear mongering and a lot of questions. And one of the things that was brought up was that, well, Black Americans, you better sit back and be quiet because you could be deported too. Let's see if that's true. We're going to take a deep dive into the 14th Amendment, why it was created, and then who was it really created for? We're also going to journey into a little bit here to see why the DOJ is also trying to see if they can deport Native Americans, which God knows, how can you deport them from their own land? And I don't even know where that came from, but we're going to dive into what the language says and if they should be concerned. There are already Native Americans that they've had ICE agents come up to them to try to detain them. So let's get into it, folks. We're going to take a deep dive and we're going to start what this statement here from Donald Trump, starting with Black Americans first here. Who was the 14th Amendment written for? Listen to what Donald Trump says here, because I think a lot of people need to hear this.
We are fighting hard to get birthright citizenship or automatic citizenship for the children of illegal aliens. That's another way. It's automatic citizenship for children of illegal aliens. That's the other term that they use, which is actually more accurate, more understandable. And it's ridiculous. We're the only country that has it, and certainly the only country that has it to that extent. And it wasn't meant, if you look, it was really meant for children of slaves. This is when it happened. The children of slaves, it was not meant for everyone to come into our country by airplane or charging across the borders from all over the world and think they're going to become citizens. It's not meant for that. It wasn't meant for that. And hopefully at some point the courts will understand that without having to go through a whole big deal. This was meant for the children of slaves. And look at the timing of it and you'll see, and I hope judges will understand that. And it has to stop because it's really hurting our country very badly. We are fighting.
Okay. Did everybody hear what he said? The 14th Amendment was for the children of slaves, for American descendants of slavery. Well, let's take a deep dive into that. Because again, I got to look up my own shit because, politicians say anything. Where did this all come from? Where did the 14th Amendment come from? To see where that came from, we need to dive into the Dred Scott decision. Let's go ahead and get into this clip here. Does the 14th Amendment guarantee birthright citizenship? Listen to this, guys.
The reason why this became important is because of Dred Scott. Dred Scott is the decision in which Chief Justice Taney held that both slaves and freed slaves could never be citizens of the United States, could not be legal persons, even though they were born on the territory of the United States. So Dred Scott itself rejected the birthright citizenship rule. The North, at great cost and lives, would then overrule Dred Scott once they won the war, and after the war enact 3 amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which I would say at the very least restored the rights of people before to birthright citizenship. Think about what...
Okay, that part right there. So again, this overturned that Dred Scott decision. So that part there is really important, right? Now, we need to look at the amendment. We need to see exactly what it says because I haven't looked at this in a long time, but this will be important when we get to the piece about what is happening to Native Americans and what the DOJ is trying to do. So listen to this. There are 5 sections. Section 1. All persons born or naturalized in the U.S. and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. This part here is very important because this is what the DOJ is starting to focus on. Are citizens of the U.S. and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the U.S., nor shall any state deprive a person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction, there's that jurisdiction again, the equal protection of our laws. Part 2, representatives shall be apportioned among the several states according to their respective numbers, counting the whole number of persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed. This part here is important. But when the right to vote at any election for the choice of electors for president and vice president of the United States, representatives in Congress, the executive judicial officers of the state or the legislator, is denied to any of the male inhabitants of such state, or in any way abridged, except for participation in rebellion or other crime, the basis of representation therein shall be reduced in proportion with the number of such male citizens shall bear to the whole number of male citizens 21 years of age in such state. So remember, back then it was they were just talking about men. And notice how they mention electors, right? Because when you vote for the president, remember, you're not really voting for the president and the vice president. You're voting for the electors. Let's go to part 3. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president or vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the U.S. or under any state, who having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the U.S. or as a member of any state support the Constitution of the U.S. shall engage in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to enemies thereof, but Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. And then 4 and 5. The validity of the public debt of the U.S. authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. But neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay any debt or obligation incurred in aid or insurrection or rebellion against the U.S. or any claim for the loss of emancipation of any slave, but all such debts, obligations, and claims shall be held illegal and void. And 5, the Congress shall have power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. So that is the 14th Amendment. And I thought it was important to look at that because, again, we go back to the Dred Scott decision. And we see here that, again, this was overturning that, and it made it very clear who this was for. Now, here's the problem. We pop out here. When there was news that the deportations were happening or was going to happen, when Trump said he was going to do mass deportations, a number of people on social media said, Black people, you better get ready because they're going to get you out of here too. No, because those of us who are descendants of slavery, we are protected by the 14th Amendment. Now, had there been no 14th Amendment and the Dred Scott decision would still be the law of the land, we would be screwed. Because the Dred Scott decision said that we were not citizens. So that's important. Now, what Donald Trump did here is called delineation. He delineated among the Black diaspora. And I know some people take issue with this and they have a problem with it, yada, yada. But when it comes to certain legal issues, this is important. The reason why it's important is the same thing for reparations. This is why I continue to tell you, you can't base reparations on race. It has to be based on status. The reparations claim on race, that will be overthrown. So the way that you do it legally is to base it on status. And if you go back and you look at General Sherman's promise, that was to slaves and their descendants, 40 acres and a mule. That's not to everybody in the diaspora. And when I say this, sometimes people's feelings get hurt. I didn't write the law. So it's important that you understand the law of the land. Yes, Nini is correct. Yvette Carnell and ADOS was the first to stress lineage and delineation. Right. It's important. People don't like it. Some people get mad. But again, I didn't make the law. So what that does show you is that Donald Trump and all his craziness and ridiculousness and foolishness, even Donald Trump understands that there's a difference. So when you're looking at things legally, you need to know that. So what did he just do? Now, I see a lot of people get upset online when people who are American descendants of slavery make that same distinction that Donald Trump just made. People are getting mad at Black Americans making that distinction. But when Donald Trump said it, they're like, oh, okay. So what's going on there? So we cannot be deported. People need to stop spreading that lie. Now, to add to this, though, here's another problem. Because now the DOJ is referring to the same amendment that I just read to you, and they are trying to say that Native Americans can be deported. Let's get into this. This is crazy. This is insane. Excluding Indians, Trump administration questions Native Americans' birthright citizenship in court. Oh my God. Here we go, guys. This is crazy. This is insane. But listen to this. The DOJ called into question the citizenship of Native Americans born in the U.S. under the 14th Amendment, citing the 19th century law that excluded Native Americans from birthright citizenship. In a case on Trump's birthright citizenship executive order coming out of D.C., attorneys quote the 14th Amendment, which reads that all persons born or naturalized in the U.S. and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, there's that term again, are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside, and hang their one on the arguments on the phrase subject to jurisdiction thereof. This is what they're focusing on. Under the plain terms of the clause, birth in the U.S. does not by itself entitle a person to citizenship. The person must also be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So they go into this piece here. They are citing a Civil Rights Act of 1866, which predates the 14th Amendment by 2 years. The Justice Department attorneys specifically cite a section of the act that notes that all persons born in the U.S. and not subject to any foreign power, excluding Indians not taxed, are hereby declared to be citizens of the United States. Does everybody see how they're paying very close attention to the text? The administration then goes on to argue that the 14th Amendment language, the phrase, the subject to jurisdiction thereof, is best understood to exclude the same individuals who were excluded by Act, i.e., those who are subject to any foreign power and Indians not taxed. They are referring to a Supreme Court case titled Elk versus Wilkins. The DOJ's attorneys, they are arguing whether or not Native Americans should be entitled to a birthright citizenship. Later in their argument, citing Supreme Court case Elk versus Wilkins, in which the court decided that because members of Indian tribes owe immediate allegiance to their tribes, they are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and are not constitutionally entitled to citizenship. Fam. Oh, hells no. People who are actually indigenous to the land. Where would you even, first of all, they're indigenous to the land. You should not deport them, period. Two, where would you send them to? They're from here. Their lineage was here before it was even the United. What? But do you see how they're reading through all of this and this piece right here? The United States connection with the children of illegal aliens and temporary visitors is weaker than its connection with members of Indian tribes. If the latter link is insufficient for birthright citizenship, the former certainly is, the Trump administration argued. So if you guys don't believe me, this person posted something and I want you to see what they're trying to break down. It says here, the Dems party are the cops of Uvalde. That's the name of their group. But they said the text of the 1924 Indian Citizenship Act reads as follows. Be it enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the U.S. in Congress assembled, that all non-citizen Indians born within the territorial limits of the U.S. be and they are hereby declared to be citizens of the U.S., provided that granting of such citizenship shall not in any manner impair or otherwise affect the right of any Indian to tribal or other property. This was approved on June 2nd, 1924. So like I said, hell's no. But this is what they go on to say. Zeneb said exactly, they can't even make this asinine argument. And the commenter responds and says they can't make the argument for the purposes of taking away Indian citizenship. But the argument is being made that the reason why the 1924 Act was necessary in the first place is because birthright didn't apply to Indians. Back then, they were still calling them Indians. Fam. It's getting messy, okay? It is hot out in these streets. That's why I told you the theme is, oh, hell's no. But they are already, you guys know there are some Native Americans that have already been approached by ICE. I kid you not. So Jordan Sheraton called this out. Listen to this.
I was contacted. I was not the only person contacted. Just so you know, there were others who were contacted. And there was an individual who was detained in Phoenix, an individual who is a Navajo male, was detained in Phoenix. Apparently it happened yesterday, and was released sometime this morning. The detainment was done by ICE, and it was a scary, traumatic experience.
This is happening in America. This is racial profiling on steroids. It is disgusting and vile. This is not about keeping America safe for the integrity and sacred border. This is just about terrorizing brown people, terrorizing people with accents, getting rid of the other.
There are a number of videos I've seen as well on TikTok of people being approached. I agree with you. It totally says it makes no sense. No, it doesn't. And the way that Native Americans are treated in this country anyway is absolutely ridiculous considering it was their land. But I don't want to end with no solution, right? So what can you do about it? This guy brought up really good points. Please pass this on to everyone that you know that is indigenous. He's going to tell you what you can do. This is really important.
So the DOJ argued that Native Americans don't have birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment, which they do. Now, that being said, if you are a Native American, you do need to be carrying some sort of tribal ID or U.S. ID on you. Apparently, several Native Americans have been detained for multiple hours without their cell phones or a way for them to contact their families or their tribes. Now, the tribe that's been most impacted by this is the Navajo Nation, and apparently this has sparked a lot of fear, especially among tribal members who live in urban areas and might struggle with getting them the proper documentation. Now, several of these Native Americans did provide documentation of either a state ID or something called a CIB, which is a certificate of Indian blood. But apparently ICE is not recognizing these documents as valid proof of citizenship.
Does everybody hear this? So why do you have to walk around with this in your pocket or this in your wallet? Like, this is insane. Like, Again, why? I mean, how would you guys feel if you were walking down the street? Let's say you just went for a walk and you said, I'm just going to leave my purse at home. I'm just going for a walk around the block. And you get stopped by a police officer and they're like, where's your ID? This is a mess.
Native Americans, people who were here long before us, people who belong here more than any of us, are being detained and questioned about being deported, and they're not accepting tribal proof, ID, whatever, as valid. Look, I'm just going to call this right now. Again, like I said in an earlier video, the criminals, the predators, all of those people, get them the heck out of here. In fact, take American ones with you. Get them out of here too. There's going to be a lot of lawsuits coming from this when it comes to American citizens and Native Americans. Now, that being said, if you are Native American, please make sure that you are carrying some form of ID that will prevent you from having to be detained for X number of hours. Anyways, to stay up to date, make sure to hit that follow button and drop your thoughts about all this in the comments.
Yeah, guys. I mean, make sure it's crazy, but make sure you have your papers on you. MBD said your papers and your passport are not in order. 30 days in Zakula. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. But that's scary stuff. I also saw there was a video where let me put this up here. A woman who was Puerto Rican. Like they tried to detain someone who's Puerto Rican. Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States. Like I don't know, man. It's scary. It's scary. But I think it is important that we broke that down so now people can stop with the rumors and the myth about the 14th Amendment. And I hope now that you guys understand like what predated the 14th Amendment, what it was a response to, and that you understand. So please pass this on to your friends. Black Americans who are descendants of slaves cannot be deported because of the 14th Amendment. Now, if they were to remove the 14th Amendment, then maybe we can talk. But right now, that's not the case. If you do know someone who's indigenous, please let them know to have documentation on them. They shouldn't have to do that, but this is where we are. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.